Well, hey there, senior leader, and welcome to the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. I'm your host and Talent Sherpa, Jackson Lynch, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Scott Morris. He's the founder of Propulsion AI. And today we're going to dive into one of the most challenging paradoxes, or paradoxi, of a CHRO and what they face. It's balancing compassion with consequence. Because I've been doing this for a while, and I think you're both a therapist and an executioner, and you're carrying emotional insight alongside the courage to deliver those hard truths. So today, I want us to spend a little time and master this tension clearly, intentionally, and without apology. So, Scott, let's dive in. You have some
I love it. I love this topic because of how I've watched you engage in the kind of feedback that I think you are talking about when I hear that intro to the audience. Here's a core question. As CHROs, how do we navigate the difference between having a lot of empathy and accountability without losing our credibility?
Well, first off, let's unpack a couple of assumptions here. I think one of the assumptions in your question is that compassion means avoiding tough decisions. I'll push back on that. I think avoiding tough decisions has a different impact. It fosters complacency, undermines trust, and might even encourage mediocrity. So I'd rather think about compassion without accountability is negligence. It's not empathy. So I got to push back on the first assumption. The other is the consequences undermine compassion. I actually think that avoiding accountability weakens organizational health. It weakens fairness. It weakens feeling trust. And instead, I think clear consequences, and you got to deliver them respectfully. Okay, you can't be a jerk. But if you are able to tie consequences and deliver them well, that actually is a trust building environment, and it allows you to provide dignity in a case where I would argue not delivering that feedback doesn't.
Unintended consequences always, well, not always, but most of the time, I think they come from trying to do something the right way and not doing it. When we're trading off, when we're not delivering the hard messages, what's the real message that gets sent to the organization when we're avoiding the consequences?
Yeah, I think it sends two. First is I think it sends a message of disrespect. I think accountability and being clear and honest, even when it hurts, is the ultimate sign of respect. And so I've had people that have worked in my organizations, both directly for me and across, that didn't want to rake people over the coals. Well, that's a delivery concern. But the underlying thing they need to hear. And I think if you don't deliver that kind of hard truth and do it in a respectful way, if you avoid that tension, you are eroding your own credibility. You are setting an example of what is tolerable in your organization. And if you think about everything we've talked about for the last 54 or so episodes, you want to audit your culture, audit your last 100 decisions. And if your decision, one of them was, I'm not going to tell people what they need to know for them to be successful. Boy, that's not a respectful culture. What do you think?
Well, I think it's the wrong message to send. And the thing about sending those kind of messages is top talent sees that, and top talent doesn't stay for that. And that kind of brings me to, another question that I think we should unpack, because a lot of times when people don't want to deliver messages that might be uncomfortable, they don't want to do that because they're prioritizing temporary emotional comfort, but they're prioritizing it over, in a lot of cases, longer-term organizational health. And that's something that as CHROs, we can't afford to allow to happen in the organization. What's your take on that?
Well, that it's wrong. Think about a world where you've had to overcome something versus where everything came easy. Which one did you grow more from? So if you don't think you need to grow, then do it whatever way you want. I have never worked for a company where that is the baseline assumption. So again, let's attack some of the assumptions here. Protecting employees from difficult truths is not supportive. If you think it is, I'm sure you're a good person and God loves you, but I think you're wrong because it creates chronic dysfunction. To your earlier point, I think it even creates hidden resentment because the A players are auditing your culture faster than anything else. And they are looking at how the non A players are being handled. And if you're ignoring sharing those difficult truths, ultimately they are fast forwarding down the timeline as to what that means for the organization. And they start deciding to go do something else because ultimately I think it reflects weak leadership. How have you seen the organization react when people confuse being liked with being effective?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that is the question. What we want to build, ideally, is a culture where you are liked because you are helping other people to grow. And you can't do that if you aren't confronting some of the difficult truths. I think one of the best books that I think I've ever read is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And in it, she makes 2 points, and both are really important, that you've got to be able to be direct about the messages, but you've got to do it with a caring for the person. And I think that's where you get to being liked. It was the person that told me the thing that I knew they were uncomfortable telling me, but they told me in a way that it made it really clear that they were doing it for my benefit and to help me become better at what I do, to help the organization become better at what it does. And I think that's actually how you get liked, by delivering those messages in a way that does both. Confront the hard truth, but do it with caring for the individual.
Yeah, let me build on that point and ask the question: who really gets served by avoiding the discomfort? It's not the employee you're trying to build up.
No, what gets served is your own lack of confidence in that moment and your own lack of skill, unfortunately, in that moment. That's the only thing that gets served. The organization loses. The individual actually loses. As long as you're delivering the messages the right way, they are benefited by tough feedback. Again, when it's done within a zone of compassion, with caring for what they're trying to do. So I don't think anybody gets served, really.
Yeah, that's true. And I would tell you that if you have a feedback dense culture, you also, as the person providing that feedback, you get to learn something because sometimes your assumptions weren't right, or you should be challenged on the way you've thought through something. And if you have that conversation, you will grow as a leader as well. If you don't have that conversation, then the entire organization kind of fits. Let me if I could. I worked in two very distinctly different cultures for kind of the first 15 years, 16 years of my career, HR career. One was with the PepsiCo organization. That is known as a data dense environment. They will give more feedback there per minute than any place else I've ever seen. And much of it is helpful. Sometimes that's so data dense that the same performance can be either a star or a slug, depending on the motivations of the person that you work for. But it is still a data dense environment. It's one of the reasons why PepsiCo folks tend to go other places and be super successful, including, I might add, CHROs. And then I worked for Nestle. And in fact, the people at Nestle were known for being Nestle nice. And I had an interesting conversation with Jean-Marc Duvigeon, who was the head of HR for Nestle over in Vevey, Switzerland one time. And he asked me what the difference was. And I said, do you really want to know? And I said, the difference between PepsiCo and Nestle is not that one is nicer than the other. The difference is at PepsiCo, when they came for you with the knife, you always saw it coming and you knew who was carrying it. And Nestle, that was not my experience. And I would come all the way back to, because we would not have the hard face-to-face conversations, that did not mean that those conversations weren't being had with somebody. And it's just transparency, even when it is painful, and I believe this in every ounce of my soul, transparency, even if it's painful, is the hallmark of a high-performing culture.
I couldn't agree with you more. When I listen to you say that, though, and especially because you're using the word culture, it drives my thinking to leadership and what leadership does, especially senior executives. Do senior executives truly own the balance between compassion and consequence, or Do they delegate that to us in HR?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, because I go back to my days at Dreyer's Grand Ice Cream, and we had a slogan. We put it on the every sign in every room, every conference room across the entire company, and the slogan was "Management is people." And the intention there was that you had an ownership of the building of your team and the development of your team, the performance of your team, if you had manager in the title. Now, fun fact, right below it, it said we don't need HR or legal, which was not the most awesome thing to see when you went in there for the job interview. But they were right. Management is, in fact, people. And so if you have leaders that are comfortable delegating tough decisions to the HR team, again, I think that leader is damaging their own credibility, their trust, and their connection. Some of the most trust building moments I've ever had in my career with my manager was when I got really hard things for me to hear. And it was because they did it in a way that I knew the intention was good. They placed it within the context of, this is an obstacle for you to be able to move forward in a way that your skills otherwise should have gotten you there already. And I I can list 5 or 6 people over the course of my career that gave me that level of feedback, and I'm grateful for all the time. So in my view, executives have to visibly own their own tough decisions. They have to, visibly own the delivery of those. If you need help, the HR team can guide it. Sometimes the HR team can soften the ground a little bit by saying, hey, there's going to be a conversation coming. I don't want you to be surprised. I want you to think through how you react in this. And I think all of that is fine. But at the end of the day, the manager owns the decisions and the feedback for their team, nobody else. And I candidly have never seen an HR guy that thought any differently. I've seen plenty that allow it to happen anyway.
Do you know what I think is funny is that the common vernacular that we hear in organizational contexts a lot is, I have an HR problem. No, you don't. You have a management problem. And I think that one of the things we've got to do as CHROs is set the context up, set the expectation up that we're not here to take care of those problems for you. We are here to coach you through taking care of those problems. We're here to bring you tool sets, skill sets, connect you with networks, help you manage it. But the manager's got to be in the driver's seat. And you just said that a second ago. I think you're 100% right on it.
Okay, Scott, you should write this down, because this is a fundamental truth in human capital. Leaders who confront difficult people decisions build stronger cultures. Let me say it louder for the folks in the back. Leaders who confront difficult people decisions build stronger cultures. I've never seen anyone regret addressing them proactively and timely. I've seen plenty of folks who waited 6, 12, 18 months only to have what could have been solved easily become a larger systemic metastasized problem.
A lot of people who are listening to us right now, I think it's easy to shake your head north-south when you hear a statement like that. But I think the reality is there is an assumption that by avoiding some tough decisions, you preserve morale. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Again, I don't mean to be Mr. No on this, but no, that's not true. It may serve the morale of the people that should be performing better. It rarely preserves morale of the people who are your A players, who are the ones that are auditing your culture every day. So A players have a deep sense of ownership for the outcomes for which they are accountable. And they want to look across the table to their peer group and make sure that everyone has the same sense of ownership that they do. And if they don't see that in their peers, and their manager isn't delivering the radical transparency necessary for the team to grow, they will feel disconnected from the organization really, really fast.
I use sports contexts a lot. And one of I think the most successful techniques that I've used in trying to help managers adopt this mindset is think about really top athletes. And think about a coach who's usually not the best player. That person on the court, on the field, they are a higher performer than that coach standing on the sidelines in terms of their physical abilities. But what the coach is really good at is looking and saying, hey, you know what? You got to draw that elbow in a little bit. Or, hey, you know what? You're not looking like, compared to what you are normally capable of, you're not sprinting as hard as you're sprinting. And that top athlete doesn't turn around and get upset about that kind of feedback, because they know that coach is out there giving that feedback because they're trying to help that player be everything that they can be on that field or on that court. And I think the mental model really works sometimes. So, when we think about our role in HR, coaching managers, I think that mental model helps a lot of managers see that feedback is really a gift.
Yeah, and let me double down on that one. I'm from Seattle, so I've watched a lot of really bad baseball over the years. So this one unfortunately hits a little close for me. But we had a manager back in the day, and we had one of our star players who had the largest contract in the history of the team, more than Ken Griffey Jr., more than Randy Johnson, more than Alex Rodriguez or Edgar Martinez. His name was Robinson Cano, and he was a pretty good ball player. And he ended up hitting a soft ground ball to short. He was going to be out, and he barely broke his stride. And the manager had an opportunity in that moment to set a standard for the entire team. And what a Joe Torre would have done, what any great manager would have done, what Lou Piniella would have done, would be to pull the player and they're done for the day. And he didn't. And months later, manager was fired. A new manager comes in, and the rationale, he had lost the locker room. Now, I'm not saying it was one event, but it was events like not holding his star player accountable that leads to that. And I don't think that's any different from what you see in a work environment. It's not just on the ball diamond.
It's interesting because giving feedback to top performers sometimes feels even more challenging than giving feedback to everybody else. And yet everybody else is watching when we're dealing with the top performers. And I think it's arguably even more important to give that feedback there for the reasons that you just mentioned in the sports analogy, because everybody sees it.
So what is the chronic cost of tolerating chronic underperformance, do you think, Scott?
Well, I mean, look, mediocrity breeds mediocrity, and excellence breeds excellence. And so the more comfortable we get, I think one of the things we've got to realize is it's like weight training, right? You don't go in to lift weights and lift the maximum amount. You have to work up to that. If you're a runner, you don't start out running 26.2 miles. You start out running a half a mile, and then you build up to it. And feedback works just like that. And the chronic cost of not doing it is you're going the other direction. So I think one of the practical things that we've got to realize is there's muscle memory to it. And you've got to start down the path, and you've got to start to get better, and you got to start to build it in until it feels natural. But then as you do that, you start to see that what you're really doing is asking people to come and join a pretty exclusive club. We've got a really good thing going on here. I'm going to help you make it even better because I want you to be in the club. That's the whole point of the feedback to begin with. But not doing it sends every one of the opposite of those messages to every single person that's watching.
Yeah, and it accumulates until it becomes crisis. And I still come back to if I'm a high performer, A player, whatever you want to call the person, they expect consequences for them and everybody else. It is a sign of respect. They want to be coached. They want to get better. They have great ambitions as to where they want to go in the organization. They are humble enough to realize they will not get there without learning from other people.
So as CHROs, Jackson, we've got sort of dual roles, right? We are leaders, and we have a responsibility to give this kind of feedback, but we have the organization to think about and how it's functioning. So, when you think about it, how do CHROs institutionalize this balance between empathy and accountability? How do we create an organizational standard?
Yeah. So first start is clarity. So I think you have to really strongly and clearly articulate what the organization's expectations are. At PepsiCo back in the day, we added a what and a how to performance. We're one of the first companies that did that. In fact, they went so strong that half of your performance review was tied to the numbers, the what, and half was how you delivered it. And if you were a manager, the expectations for you to be delivering strong reviews for your folks was off the charts. You had 3 layers higher than you in the organization reviewing your ability to do that task well. So that, by the way, is an important way to reinforce. I think you also need to train leaders on how to do it in a clear and compassionate way, but still to do it and to fight through the discomfort. And just as a quick plug, one of the ways, if you ever get stuck in a place where you're not sure how to lean into it, use that phrase. Hey, Scott, I need to lean into discomfort here. It is very grounding. It means that you know that this is going to be hard and you're doing it anyway. And it reinforces you're doing it for them, not to them. And then I think ultimately you have to embed kind of that transparency in the performance and cultural conversations. You need to model it. You need to reinforce it, and you need to hold others to account for it. If you have leaders who are not doing it, you need to find where they are and address it.
That's well said. I think I get to do this one this time. We're at the point in the podcast where if you've been multitasking, you need to come back in because Jackson is about to do the summary. How do you wrap up this episode for everybody, Jackson?
Well, I think there are 4 things I'd like to make sure we all take away. First is accountability is foundational. It's not optional. You don't get to choose not to do it. And you have to master as a leader kind of that dual dynamic of empathy and directness. You have to give people the feedback. You have to lean into that discomfort, and you have to do it in a way that builds people up and treats them respectfully. I think you need to embed all of these practices systemically. You can't do it ad hoc. You have to do the plan, do, check, act, and make sure that you are really driving it through the organization, starting with the senior leaders. Probably not the CEO because they have their own kind of set of rules. But throughout the balance of the organization, you got to make sure, because that is on you. If there is a failure in this point, it's not an organizational failure. It's a personal one. That's how important this is. And then I think you have to take the steps to build a talent philosophy and a reinforcement philosophy, both with consequences, compensation, promotions, all of the people process that you need to thread through to make balanced leadership a non-negotiable expectation. And I think that's ultimately how you do it. And when you do that well, my belief is you create an organization where people belong. You create an organization where people have the ability to make mistakes and not feel like it is a career ender. If the only time you're getting negative feedback is the one time you got feedback, that's the problem, not the negative feedback. And if you approach these things well, the best companies out there are feedback dense. And so that's, I think, are the 4 things I'd ask you to take away.
Great summary.
Okay. So let me, in wrapping this up, thank you so much for tuning into the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is, of course, where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. And I want to give a quick shout out to one of our favorite listeners. Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for being a part of the Talent Sherpa community. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please hit that like button, subscribe, leave a 5-star review on your favorite platform, whether it's Apple or Spotify or YouTube. If you want to give a 2-star review, forget I said anything. And don't forget to check out a couple of our day jobs. One is Propulsion AI. You can find that at www.getpropulsion.ai. That's transforming how smart companies turn HR insights into powerful outcomes. And if you're an emerging or new CHRO, please head on over to the Talent Sherpa Substack or my new website, mytalentsherpa.com. Those resources are designated to help you navigate, elevate, and deliver results from day one. So, Scott, thank you for joining us. Everyone else in TV land and on the radio, appreciate you being here. And until next time, keep leading the business, keep focusing on outcomes, and keep on climbing.